Hello, I am Jonathan Crook, Print Technical Consultant for HP. In this training video, I am going to do an overview of HP WebJet Admin. Today I'm using WebJet Admin version 10.5 SR9. This video will be a little different than the other videos you may have seen, where I'm going to do an overview of how to add machines, add templates, basically the full thing about WebJet Admin and what its functions are. You'll also find other more detailed videos in our channel regarding a little bit more in depth in some of these areas as well. But this is just to get you started. WebJet Admin is a free utility that can be downloaded from HP.com, and it's designed to basically help manage an HP fleet, push settings to HP devices, and maintain more of a standardization across the devices themselves, right? So today we're going to talk about how this tool can be used, and I'll show you some of the basics to start with. So the first thing about HP WebJet Admin and HP devices is that HP is very security centric. And so we do not create back doors into our printers for customer networks. So in order for WebJet Admin to actually set settings on devices, the first thing we have to do is set what credentials does the software need in order to set settings on the HP devices. So in order to do that, in order to set credentials, we're going to go up to Tools, we're going to go up to Options, and you can see here I've kind of already got the window where we need to go. There's a Credentials area under Shared, Device, and then you can see here we have SNMP version 1, version 2, or version 1, get and set, version 3, EWS or domain password. In this case, this is where the admin passwords for the devices are. So these are the areas where you're going to want to plug in those passwords here. And so you can see I can come in here and I can add, and I can say, I can give it a name or give it a password, and I can give it a name, right? So get HP2. If you notice, it actually has the ability to store more than one password. And this can be really crucial in larger environments where you might have different passwords in different areas of the environment, or you're starting to take over all the HP devices and you know there are multiple passwords to start with. So you have the ability to actually add multiple passwords into each of these areas. And what's going to happen is as we push templates or push settings to devices, the software will actually go and use each of these passwords until one of them works. Now, it's important to note the more passwords you have, the longer it may take to set credential or set information or settings on the HP devices. So in most cases, a lot of customers, they're trying to standardize and they're trying to not have so many passwords. And so a recommendation would be is if you're starting out new, obviously you need to put in all these passwords because you're trying to set the settings on all the devices, as many devices as you can at once. But once you've gone through and you know you've set those settings or set those passwords, feel free to come in here and actually remove passwords you no longer need, because then that just means the software doesn't have to go through and use those passwords every time it pushes settings. But the first things first is obviously is setting those passwords so the software knows and has the rights to be able to set the settings on the printers themselves. Once you've set these up, we're going to hit OK. So the next thing we want to do is actually we need to go out and find the HP devices, right? So we're going to do a discovery. Now, there's a couple different ways to do it, right? WebJet Admin focuses a lot on templates. And so if we go into discovery here, we can see we have a template section here, but you can see we also have a devices section up here as well. And these are, the discovery is more about the templates, right? Creating IP ranges that the system's going to go out and look for devices. But we can always come up here, right click on all devices and say discover devices, right? So there's a couple different ways to go about it. So I'm going to go ahead and create a template though, just so you can see how template creation works, because template creation is going to work in settings as well as discovery. So if I go to templates, I can come over here to create. And then from here, it's going to ask me, how do I want to communicate over the network? And so you can see we have a lot of varieties here. Multicast, IP range, we got WS discovery. In most cases, you're probably going to do an IP range, right? And so I'm going to click on IP range and click next. And you can see here, I actually already have a couple ranges included inside of my system. Now, if you notice, I've got the Office 2 actually falls in line with the Office as well. So you can actually have more than one range. So if you are wanting to focus your discovery around IP ranges where printers are residing, because you might have computers on one IP range and printers on another IP range and so on, you can actually add in different ranges here. And by doing that, we can just click add, and then it's going to ask me what's the first address, what's the last address, and then give it a name, give it a description, right? That way you know what that range is. And the other cases here too is I could come in here and later on is I could delete one of these ranges if I wanted to. But for this purpose here, I'm going to uncheck Office 2 and I'm going to just leave Office. In fact, you can see delete came up. So I could actually come in here, delete Office 2, right? Get that out of there and then just check off Office, right? And then we're going to click next. And then it's going to ask, are there any credentials you want to use, right? So while we have the global credentials that we set up first, you do have the ability to give credentials for templates if you want to, right? If not, the system is going to go ahead and go out and use the global credentials. But you can see here, we got to go and select it, right? So we can either, when we go discovery, discovery is going to use the standard public get. If you have public disabled in your environment, then it would not find anything. But I recommend is you go in and if you set those credentials, go ahead and say specify and just say use global credentials. You don't need to actually fill out anything here. We click next and we're going to give it a name. So in this case here, I am going to give it a name of home office scan for my home office. I'm going to click next and I'm going to hit create template. And now that I've done that, you can see that the template actually shows up here under the templates, even though this window is still available, right? And what's really nice about it is it does give you the option, do you want to run the discovery now? So you could literally check this off, click done, and what it's going to do is go through running a discovery. So the same thing that I was showing you up here with right click and discover, it's the same exact window. So that makes it very nice here. You can see they're identical, right? So I'm going to close out one. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, yes, we're going to use that template. Now, can you, let's say you're doing a one-time discovery, you could say specify, and you could give it a range, right, and go through those same steps and do a one-time discovery without creating a template. You can do that as well. And you can see here down below, we also have the ability to schedule the discovery if you want. So that's always a nice thing as well, is scheduling a periodic discovery. So we're just going to click on use the template. And it's showing me how many IPs it's going to do. So we're going to go ahead and start, and we're going to do this discovery here. And what it's going to do, it's going to go out and find nodes on the network. And so you're going to see here, there's definitely not 34 printers in my home office, but it's found 34 devices connected to that range. And once it's found those devices, now it's going to go through and actually resolve them, or basically see which of these devices are actual printers, right? Because printers are going to communicate based off certain commands versus a laptop or a router, things like that. Those aren't necessarily going to respond to commands that printers would. So we'll see here as it goes through. All right, now that all the nodes are resolved here, you can see that the total time was about 2 minutes and 23 seconds, and it found 6 devices across 34 nodes on the network. Once we've done this discovery, we click on done, and what we will see here is in the field at the top here, all these devices have populated now. And if passwords are correct and everything's good, you should start seeing check marks across the board here. And this machine here is one of those machines that I have some different passwords. So there's a little bit of communication error because I don't have proper credentials, right? So to give you an idea of what some of this looks like. And this device here is a scanner, so it's a little bit different. So it has an exclamation point because it's actually in sleep mode or deep sleep mode right now. So that's how you can discover devices. You can either right click, discover, or you can create a template. So now the next step is we have the ability to group devices. And this can be really crucial when you're looking at a larger fleet because when you create groups, it helps you better identify devices in certain areas. And groups can be different, right? So you can see here, I've got some already created. I've got a manual group, which is basically I add devices manually into that, but I've got two what are called automatic groups. They have this little like chain link next to them. And if you notice, each of them have two next to them. And that's because devices are automatically added into these groups if they meet the criteria that I've determined, right? So this one here, color devices, does it have color in the name, and MFPs does it have MFPs in the name. You could have ones for specific models or departments based on IP range, things like that, right? So groups are pretty straightforward. You can right click and you can say new group, right? And from here, we can come in here, and so I can say training group, and what parent group is it under. So I can actually create groups inside of groups if I wanted to. For this purpose here, now we are going to just leave it under the parent, and you can see I've got a manual group or an automatic group. Manual group, we go through, it creates the group, and we're done. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what an automatic group looks like. Automatic group, we click on next, and now it's going to ask me what is the criteria for which machines end up in this. And it functions through essentially like Boolean searches and things like that, right? So on the left here, what property are we going to be looking at? And so you can see there's a ton of different options and settings that we could be looking at when we are trying to determine where this machine needs to go. And in a lot of cases here, there could be a lot of different things. And so sometimes it's hard to find what you're looking for. You could be device name, things like that. Now, for purposes of this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say automatic updates, right? And let's say it's enabled. Now, what this means, though, is automatic updates for like firmware are generally pro models and things like that, but you can kind of get an idea here as far as what we're looking at here. I could come in here and say network under the category, and then I could come in here and say, let's try to find IPv4. Nope, I want IP address. And you could say contains, right? So maybe depending on the third octet of an IP address, that's a let's say a nurses stations or HR department or finance, right? So you can actually group devices based on a property like the IP address. And you can see here there's a ton of ways you can use these Boolean searches. And so it just takes time to go through and learn and see what some of these are. So in this case here, I'm going to say contains 192.168.1. Now, what this should happen is all my devices should end up in here because that's my standard IP range in my home office. I click OK. You can see it shows it here. I'll click next, and I'll click on create group. And then once I'm done, I hit done. And you can see here this training group has 6 devices. So it registered that all of the devices follow that rule. So they were all automatically added to there. So that's how you kind of group devices together. If you want to do something manually, right, you can come into a device and say, you know what, this one here, I want to take it and I want to add it to a group. So I can come in here and then I can see there's my manual group. If you noticed, my automatic groups aren't there because they're automatically designed to add machines. Only your manual groups are going to show up here. So I can click on manual group, click next, and click add devices, and I click done. And now if I look at my manual group, I've got that one device sitting in there at that 633. So the next thing is we've added the credentials, we've found devices, we've grouped devices. Now we want to start creating templates for settings, right? And so template creation is pretty much the same way, but there is a different way of creating a template based off of a machine already in the fleet. You can see here I've got a lot of templates already set up. While I dumped out a lot of stuff in my VM, I did leave a few things because I've got a lot of good templates in here that I like. But if you also notice with templates for configuring devices, I've also got a folder in here, and inside there I've got its own template. So you can actually create folders inside the configuration templates, which can help you kind of organize your templates and how you're doing it. Now, one of the things we recommend is we don't create a template with 10 different settings, right? If you imagine trying to push 10 settings to 100 devices, that could take a while. You may be pushing a setting that requires another setting to be enabled or set up first before it can do it. And so WebJet admin won't do things in a specific order. It just goes through and starts trying to set those settings. So sometimes what you may want to do, and what I've shown for a lot of customers, is maybe number the templates in the order you should be applying them to devices. That way you're ensuring that certain settings are in place before you attempt to do other settings. Okay. So the first way I'm going to show you to do a template is actually you can create a template based off of an existing device. And to me, this is by far the easiest, and I'll explain why. So when we come into here, I'm gonna pick on my 67755. I have a configuration tab. Down here, these are all the groupings of settings for this device. Now, HP devices have a lot of different settings. WebJet admin is designed to be able to handle even things like scan to email SMTP servers, quick sets or shortcuts for scanning purposes, all those things, right? So this can get very overwhelming very quickly. So just take your time as you go through it, but I'm going to show you a couple other things, right? So let's say I'm going to go into the network, and this is a real-time communication between WebJet admin and the devices. So WebJet admin is communicating with the device and actually asking for all of the settings and what they are set at. So when you are going through this process here, it's actually communicating and talking. Now, you can see here under network, I've got quite a few things. And so one of the things is, if you notice, I have a My Settings up here at top. These can be the settings that you do on a regular basis inside of your organization. So for My Settings, once you found the setting that you want inside of there, and I'm pretty sure IPv4 is already there, if you right click on it, you can see, well, let's try a different one here. Nope, DNS is in there as well. Let's try protocol. You can see down here, add to My Settings. So if there's a setting that's not already in there, it says add to My Settings, and you can actually click on it and say add. Now, the other thing is, like IPv4, if I right click, you can see it says remove from My Settings, and this is where you could remove it there. But like I said, most of the time you're going to want to put settings in there that you work on a regular basis, or those are the settings your organization's focusing on, because then when we come in here and we expand out My Settings list, it's not searching all of the settings in a group. It's only pulling down the data for the settings that you are worried about or responsible for, whatever the case may be. So as soon as this populates My Settings, and I think I've got quite a few now because I've done quite a few trainings with WebJet admin on it, it's a list, again, that's determined based on you. All right, now that all my settings have populated under here, you can see I've got a different variety, right? I got outgoing servers for email. I've got automatic firmware update stuff, right? So there's a lot of things in here. But how do we create a template, right? So the reason we're doing this is because this is pulling down settings that maybe these are the settings that you want to transmit across all of the other devices inside of your organization. So for instance, I'm just going to pick on the DNS server, right? So let's say we want to make sure we set the DNS for every device across the fleet to these settings here. I can take DNS server, I can check it off, and I can see it's already populated with the domain and the DNS, the primary and secondary DNS. And I check it off, and it even includes the gear here. And you can see here I have a save as template. So this actually allows me to save the actual settings of the machine as a template that I can use to push down the road. Now, this screen pops up, and this one here can get very overwhelming because there is a list of every HP device known to man in here, along with all the different network cards that HP has done throughout the years, right? This is far easier than you may anticipate, right? If you notice on the right here, it pre-populated Enterprise MFP and Enterprise NIC, or Network Interface Card. That's because these are the two that this template needs for setting the settings properly. Now, what I'm going to walk you through is some of the other things to keep in mind. Now, this says MFP. With enterprise class devices in HP, you can actually do printers and MFPs. And let's say you had scan to email settings in there, it would just error out for a single function printer, but it would still set the settings for an MFP. So you see here, I have an enterprise class that doesn't say MFP. I can actually add that over here. And what that does is that means now it will attempt to also do those on those devices. Now, if we were doing, say, Pro models, you can see here I have a Pro MFP, a Pro single function printer here as well. And then if I do a search down here on the NIC cards, you can see here I also have a couple different Pro NIC cards available as well. So when you are setting up templates inside of WebJet Admin, it's important to note the difference. There are enterprise class devices and there are Pro model devices. So you may have a template that is the same but different because one template's for Pro and one is for Enterprise. So it's important that when you're naming these templates as well, that you have an idea of what class of device it's going to go for. But for this purpose here, I'm going to leave it as Enterprise. I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to say Enterprise DNS setting, right? And you can see here it's got a gear next to what settings are included in this, and I can come in here and still look at it. So it's like an overview. I click Next, and it shows me the settings. I click Create Template, and now I have a new template called Enterprise DNS Setting. So that's how you create a template by using an existing device. Now, if we were creating a template from scratch, essentially we would come over here to the templates under configuration, right click, and say create configuration template. If you notice, it starts off by showing us that other screen where we were picking what model or what type of class of device the HPs that we're pushing this template for. That's because instead of looking at a device for what settings it has to offer, now we are going to populate a list of settings based on what type of device or NIC cards the machines are going to be pushing settings for. So what I'm going to do here is hopefully try to show you something different. So I'm going to add Enterprise and Pro into the mix, which is possible and you can do it. But generally what happens is that sometimes when you're pushing enterprise settings to a Pro device, you're going to throw off errors. It doesn't mean it didn't work. It just means that it errored out because the Pro model maybe didn't have that setting, but the enterprise does. So sometimes to alleviate how many errors you see from pushing templates, grouping them differently can be a good thing. So I'm going to click on Next, and now it's populating a list of settings based on what I just chose there. So now I'm trying to see here, if I go to firmware, nope, that's not what I'm looking for. As much as I'd like to say I have memorized WebJet admin, I have not. But you can see here, here's a good example. I'm going to push this out. Access control for device functions. There's FutureSmart 3 and non-FutureSmart devices, which are Pro models, and then we have FutureSmart 4 and above. This is what I'm talking about with, because I selected both Pro and Enterprise, these showed up here. And it could be a different setting. This might show up as Enterprise only because of FutureSmart 3, but you can see that I've got access controls for device functions, 2 different ones. And that's because they are different depending on the type of device you're pushing a template to. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to expand, and we're going to look at the DNS server again. And you can see here, DNS server has 2 different settings, applies to one of 6 models. And you can see here when you hover over it, LaserJet Pro NIC versus Enterprise NIC. And so if we were using both classes here, we would actually need to check off both. And I'm just going to plug in figure here real quick. And if I click Next, oh, I forgot to give it a name. That's right. Let's give it a name. DNS server, Enterprise, and Pro. Next, it shows me the settings. I click on Create Template, and I click Done. And now I've got my template here. So there's a couple different ways to create templates. By far the easiest is picking on one that's already pre-set up with a device, checking off the settings, and just creating the template, right? You don't have to actually fill anything out, stuff like that. Now we've created templates. The last thing we need to do is just push the settings to the device, right? So for this case here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my inactivity timeout template here, which is basically after 60 seconds, the machine resets itself, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to push a template. There's a couple different ways to push templates here. You can actually do it from the template itself, right? So I can click on it. I can click apply. It's going to ask me, okay, this is the template. And this is the name, and this is what we're going to use, right? And we click on next. It's going to ask me what devices or groups do I want to apply this template to. So I can say groups, and I could say all devices, or I can come down in here to my manual group, whatever the case may be. For this purpose here, I'm just going to go to device. Yes, I want to continue. I'm going to say I just want to push my 6755. I'm going to click next. And then I'm going to click apply. And what it's going to do is it's going to go talk to that machine and actually push out the template. And you can see here it's a success. If the more settings you have, you might see warnings and errors pop up here. You can always click on the details to see more information about what setting may have caused an error on what device. So you can really kind of look and dive into that. So that's one way to push a template. The other way is from a device itself, right? I can come in here to that same 677. I could go right click and go configuration, apply configuration template. And again, you see that same exact screen here, except now it's defaulting to that first one. So I could say, no, I'm going to go to inactive, click on next, click apply, and it's going to go through that same process. So we've added passwords, we've added devices, we've created groups and added devices to it. We've created templates, and we've pushed templates to our devices. And so that is really kind of the basics of WebJet admin to get going, right? There's a lot of functionality inside the tool. It has a lot to offer, including things like firmware updates and stuff like that. That obviously is going to be for another video, and I know we've got other videos already out there for stuff like that. But hopefully this has been informative for you. Have a great day.